You're watching BBC News. Let's turn to the Middle East because the United Nations says Israel has not done enough to meet a 30-day deadline to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. The demands set by the US included allowing access to more aid, evacuating the sick and critically injured, and limiting civilian casualties. Well, in the last hour, Israel's President, Isaac Herzog, has been meeting with President Biden to discuss the crises both in Gaza and Lebanon. Well, let's talk to our correspondents. Jonathan Beale is in Jerusalem for us and Tom Bateman is in Washington. Tom, I'll start with you because the deadline is almost up. What can we expect from the Americans, given none of the major things laid out in that letter 30 days ago have come to fruition?
Well, I think it's becoming increasingly clear that the Americans are going to say they believe that the Israelis have made progress in terms of facilitating more humanitarian aid getting into Gaza, and therefore that they won't be enacting any changes of policy. Because remember, the threat in this letter was basically that if the Israelis don't surge aid in, particularly into the north of Gaza, that the Americans would, in their words, review or carry out an assessment in relation to US laws and policy that could entail the restriction of US military assistance, so cutting off some weapons supply, if you look at the letter of the law of the kind of laws they were quoting. But it is now my sense very strongly that in the next couple of hours or so, the Americans are going to say that at the end of this 30-day deadline today, they believe that the Israelis have basically done enough to make progress, to show commitment to getting more aid into Gaza, and therefore that there won't be any restrictions on weapon supply to the Israelis.
And Tom, how does that fit with the figures in terms of aid deliveries going in, the number of trucks that's coming from UNRWA, because they're pointing to only 6% of what the Americans had said should be allowed in?
Well, it doesn't fit at all. I mean, what the Americans are saying bears no relation to what the evidence is for the amount of aid getting into Gaza. We've heard that from UNRWA, as you've been reporting. We've heard it from the UN's humanitarian agency. There was a report today by 18 aid organizations saying that not only has the situation not got any better, it's actually deteriorated in the north of Gaza. We've had the Americans themselves at the United Nations over the last few weeks saying that they are watching the Israelis to ensure that, quote, a policy of starvation is not taking place in the north of Gaza. So what we're going to have, I think, from the Americans is a form of words that will, I think, effectively say that they think there is the sort of intent and good faith from the Israelis to try and improve the situation. I think they will probably fudge around the actual evidence that shows very clearly what's happening in the north of Gaza, and therefore they will try to attempt to say that they think the Israelis are on the right track in terms of what they're attempting to do, albeit they're not there yet, and that they'll keep monitoring the situation to ensure that the aid actually gets to people who need it.
Let me bring Jonathan Beale in there in Jerusalem. Jonathan, in terms of what we're seeing on the ground, we have seen more strikes from the Israelis. We've also seen Hezbollah launch more rockets. How does that fit with what Israel's foreign minister was saying about the state of Hezbollah over the last, 36 hours?
Yeah, so Israel's new defense minister was saying that essentially Hezbollah had been defeated, and that's because they had taken out the leadership of the militant group in Lebanon. But as you say, since then, Hezbollah have been firing dozens of rockets into Israel, including today. Some of those rockets killed a few Israeli citizens. Also, the airport to Tel Aviv was closed. So it doesn't feel like it's coming to an end, that military operation. Of course, there are still thousands of Israeli troops over the border. Now, I think the hope is that there can be, in the future, a ceasefire. That might be something that they can give the Biden administration in its dying days. Because let's be honest, when we're talking about the demands that the Biden administration has made on Israel, both on getting aid into Gaza, on expanding its military operations, Israel has paid little heed to that. And I think that at the moment, they are looking very much forward, as far as this Israeli government is concerned, to the new administration, President Trump. So I think it is frustrating for the current US administration, President Biden, They will say, as Tom has said, that there has been progress on aid, but it's nowhere near the progress they had promised in terms of getting aid into Gaza. And equally, when it comes to the war with Hezbollah, there is a hope that at some stage there can be a ceasefire, but it doesn't seem to be there at the moment, that's for sure.
Jonathan, on a separate issue, let me read the latest statement from Benjamin Netanyahu, who's sent out another message directly to the Iranian people saying, there is one thing the regime fears more than Israel. It is you, the people of Iran. Do not lose hope. Briefly, what do you read into that?
Well, as you say, a direct message with Israel's Prime Minister appealing to the Iranian people, not the government, saying they're wasting money, the Iranian regime, on firing rockets into Israel, which is costing billions of dollars, money which he says could be spent on the people. And I think, there are two things here. First of all, I think he is warning the Iranian regime against carrying out another attack, a retaliatory attack on Israel, and also he may be also indicating that there is change coming with the election of Donald Trump and the fact that he's saying Donald Trump and him see eye to eye on Iran.
Jonathan Beale there in Jerusalem, thank you, and thanks to Tom Bateman in Washington. You're up to date